So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and create a new project. For this, we're again going to go ahead and create a console application. We're going to call this EF generate database. So we'll call this generate database off a model. Once it's loaded, let's go ahead and go to our Solution Explorer. Let's go ahead and create a new item. Again, we're going to go add new item. When the new item dialog pops up, what we're going to do is go over to data. And we're going to choose ADO.NET Entity Data Model. This is going to be similar to what we did in the previous episode where we took a look at how to go from our database to our data model. But first we're going to come here, we're going to call this Dimecast model. And here our wizard pops up. Previously we generated from a database, but this time we want to go from empty model. This will allow us to create the design surface, but not actually have to worry about picking a database to connect to and retrieving the schema off that database. So now that our design surface has been created, there's two ways to start creating our entities. The first way is we can come over to our toolbox and we can create a new entity. And I could drag this onto our model. This will create a default entity for us. The other way is I can right click the design surface. I can click add entity. And this is the way we're going to go about doing it. So the first entity I want to create is called episode. And you'll notice that when it creates a set, it automatically pluralizes it. And I have the ability to create a key. Now of course, because we do have keys, I do want to keep this. I can leave the default of ID if I want, or I can change it to be something like episode ID. But we're going to go ahead and leave it as ID. I can choose the property type. Is it an integer, binary, boolean, GUID, whatever the case may be? You can choose that. So let's go ahead and click OK. You'll see it goes ahead and generates our episode entity for us with a single property. Let's go and add a new property. So we're going to say scalar property. I'm going to call this name. And I'm going to choose to add a couple more. So we'll call this release date. And we've created name, description, number, and release date. Now so far I haven't done anything to define the types of these. To do this, what I'm going to want to do is this. I'm going to want to select my column and I want to come over to my properties pane. Let's go ahead and pin that and bring that next to it. So in our properties pane, you'll see that I have the ability to set some values. I can tell you if it's an entity key, which we know this isn't, if it's fixed length, if it's got a max length. The difference between the fixed length and max length is whether you want it to be a varchar or an nvarchar. You can say if it's nullable. We're going to say this is not allowed to be nullable. And you can determine the setter scope. Is it going to be public, private, or protected? Now for this, we're going to go ahead and leave it as a name. I'm going to set the max type to, I don't know, 50. And we'll set our fixed length to 50 as well. I'm sorry, fixed length to true, excuse me. Description can have a length of 250. Number is going to be integer, so I'm going to come down, I'm going to change type from string to int32. And you'll notice as soon as I do that, my options do change. And release date is going to be a date. So we'll come down here and I'll choose date time. And again, my options change. None of these are allowed to be null at this point in time. So I've now created my episode. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to want to go ahead and create something like episode tags. So I can specify what type of episode this is. And we'll also do the same thing for authors. So I'm going to go ahead and right click, do add new entity. We'll call this episode tags. Leave all the others set the same. Go ahead and click OK. We're going to add a new column here. We'll call this name. And we're going to set name to have a max length of 25. The next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and create an association between episode and episode tags. So to do this, what I need to do is right click, do add association. This will bring up the add association dialog where I can change my association name and it will give me the start and end objects to start with. So we can say that we can do an episode has one to many episode tags. So we can leave this all the same. And I can even have it change my name on my navigation property. So let's go ahead and click OK. And you'll see that it goes ahead and creates my association for me. but will also create my navigation properties for me. So it creates a property called episode tags here and a property episode here, so we can walk back and forth. Let's do that one more time. Let's do it with episode author. And I can again add association, and I'm going to change this to author, and again it creates my associations. So that is how I can go about creating my default, or I'm sorry, my entities without generating them off of my database. Now the next thing we want to take a look at is how can I generate the SQL scripts needed so I can create my database off of my model. To do this, I just want to simply right click the design surface and come down to where it says generate database from model. When I do this, let's go ahead and click it. You'll see that it asks me which connection I want to use. I'm going to go ahead and leave it as the dimecast.net connection. And this is a connection that will basically point to the dimecast.net database for us. I'm going to click next. Then it's going to bring up my SQL. And I can even change the name of it if I want. But I'm going to leave that the same. And if I look through the SQL, you'll see it creates my tables, creates the alter statements for the primary keys, the references, the whole 9 yards. So let's go ahead and click finish. Now after it's generated, what you'll see is let's get this out of the way here. What you'll see is the SQL statement that we just looked at a second ago in the preview window. Now take note, right now this database does not exist. It has not created these tables for me because I've only generated my SQL. And in fact, if I go to my Solution Explorer, you'll see the SQL file is right there. If I want to actually generate the database off of this, what I want to do is this. First, so I don't override my existing, I'm going to call this test. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to right click. And the first thing I want to do is validate the syntax. So I just want to make sure all my syntax is correct. It's going to ask me to log in, so let's go ahead and log in. And it tells me that everything is correct, so we're good there. So the next thing I want to do is go ahead and say execute SQL. And because I've only got a few tables, it's going to generate pretty quickly. So to prove that it's actually generated my tables, let's go ahead and bounce over and take a look at our database. So if I look here, I have my database called dimecast.net_test. You'll see that there's 3 tables here: episode authors, episode, and episode tag. And if I open up this, you'll see that it does set my values. So for example, name was 50, description is 250, set the date time type as well. So that is how I can go and generate my database. Now last thing we want to take a look at is some details on the database within the design view. So we can sit there and we can say, okay, I want to use the default code generation strategy. I want to use the table per type strategy, which is the default within Entity Framework. I can change some of the other values in here, such as my default namespace, pluralize or unpluralize, things of that nature. And I can even take a look at the connection string that's going to be used. And if I want to change my naming schema, instead of DBO, I can put Derik or maybe Dimecast, and I'll generate my table using that schema. So as you can see, going from an entity to a database is extremely simple. It will generate SQL you can run over and over again, but it's also something that allows you to get up and running quickly when you don't have an existing data structure, but you want to use the Entity Framework's model to database process. So I hope you learned something, and until next time.